Good morning and welcome to Let the Bible Speak. My name is Alex Meredith. I'm the preacher for the Marquette Church of Christ. I'm here today with Dave Grant with the Escanaba Church of Christ. I know that many of you will recognize him as longtime host of Let the Bible Speak. It's been a few years since you've been on, hasn't it?
4 years.
4 years. But he's back with me today. In fact, all through the month of March, we've got a number of special episodes lined up because what we're doing this month is we are celebrating 50 years that Let the Bible Speak has been in operation. So as part of that, what we're going to do today is I would like to do a little back and forth with Dave here and talk about the history of the program, talk about how it got started, and some of the core principles that we operate on in this. So we'll just get right into it. I've got a few questions lined up here for him. So let's start with the first one. You know, my understanding from what I know about Let the Bible Speak is that this is something that your dad was very involved in starting up, Les Grant, and he kind of came up and formulated the initial concept of this ministry. So could you just walk us through how that got started and how it got going?
I would love to. I do want to warn you ahead of time that once you ask me to speak, I have a hard time shutting it off, as the audience probably already knows. But my dad moved here in '72, and this was the last place I wanted to live. It was too cold, too much snow, and we were from Texas. So I went right away back to Abilene, Texas. Now, unfortunately, school and I didn't get along real well at 18 years old, so I didn't go back to Texas at Christmas break. I stayed here. My dad was coming up with some ideas on how to reach out into the UP. We were in Escanaba. We had a very small church group, a church family of 5, and that included my mom, my dad, and my little brother. So there were 5 people, and then within a year, two were gone. One died and one moved away. And so it frustrated him that he came to a new area to work, and there was nobody here at the church already. So he says, how can I reach out to the Upper Peninsula with the message of the gospel? And he borrowed a lot of ideas from other people, the Herald of Truth and other TV ministries that were in their early stages, to come up with this idea. And he made a partnership with TV6 because they are, they're celebrating 70 years right now. So it's important that you understand we had to get an idea of what it was going to cost. And at that time, about $400 or $500 a month. And so my dad says, well, if I could get, or is that $400 or $500 a week? I can't remember. But
I wasn't there.
You weren't even born. But in '76, TV6's rates were a little less than they are right now. And so $400 a week. And so he had this idea, and somebody in the Upper Peninsula that watched the program too later on had said, well, why don't you ask people to give $1 a week? Just give up a donut and a cup of coffee. At that time it was only $1. And so he went out preaching to churches and asked them to support him to do this TV ministry. And he asked for $1 a week from 400 people, and then he could be on TV. Well, that worked. Didn't work for a long term, but it worked for short term. And so he got on TV, and he invited other ministers in the area to join him. And it was called Bible Questions, Bible Answers. And it was more of a panel discussion answering questions from the public. Yeah, that went on for at least a year, maybe 2 years, and it was harder to control 4 different preachers because you know how preachers like to talk. So he changed it to a single format where he would sit in front of the camera and he would just work through a Bible study with someone. And it was similar to sitting at a kitchen table in somebody's home. And so that personal touch really kind of directed the program and the hosting of the program for years to come. I did that approach except when I wanted to bring somebody else in to help out for a special occasion, or when Alex moved here, I said, well, why don't you come on and just help me host for a couple of weeks and see what you think of it. Well, I was grooming him to actually take my place, so he probably figured that out because I had gray hair then too. But Alex has done a terrific job, and my dad would be proud, even though he never got to meet Alex. So I think that's the concept of the ministry and how it started. A woman challenged my dad, well, why don't you go on the road and tell churches that if they can give $1 a week. And he got people that for a long time would send $1 a week. And then they started saying, well, you know, it'd be cheaper if I just sent $4 a month. Well, now we get mostly monthly and annual gifts.
And these are people from within the church as well,
The Churches
right?
of Christ. It was part of the initial plan that we would not ask viewers for money. I don't know if you've watched a lot of televangelists, but there's quite a few of them that are, well, they're asking for money. You know, call this number and we'll talk to you, and then they work you.
Yeah, $5 for a prayer, right?
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
we've never asked for money on the program. And if we have something, we normally give it away, or we say, this is where you can order it. So it's important. That was part of the standard at the beginning, and it still is today.
So
You're not asking for money, are you?
no.
Okay, good. Good.
No. So why don't you tell us, so that's sort of the very beginnings of the program and the idea of it. How did you specifically get involved and into things here? What did that look like on your end?
Well, when my dad started the program in '76, I was 24. How old would I have been?
I wasn't there.
22. I was 22 years old, so I had my mind in other places. I wasn't thinking about what my dad was doing. I was faithful at church. I did the song leading. I taught classes. But when it came to being involved in the preparing and knowing what he was going to be doing next, I really wasn't paying a lot of attention. But about 16 years in to the program, which is 34 years ago, my dad started having some health concerns. I came home on vacation one year, and my dad was preaching from a stool because he couldn't even stand for the whole sermon. And that kind of bothered me. So through a series of events, I eventually moved back to the area and said, I'll help you out. I don't want to be a preacher, but I'll help you out. And so I helped him until one day he says, can you do TV for me for a couple weeks? And I said, sure. Well, I did TV for a couple weeks, and I don't know if you knew it, but one time I was as young as Alex. And the audience responded in such a way that, why is this young guy on? And so young families and our demographics changed dramatically because I was a lot younger than my dad, a little more energy than my dad. And so he said, this is going really well. Can you stay on a little longer? And so I was on for 31 years just because he didn't feel like he could do it this week.
Nobody told you to stop.
Hey, I turned into a preacher, you know. But so that's how my involvement began. And I really think it was by design.
Yeah.
I wanted to ease up my dad's schedule, and I did. Been here ever since.
So you'd mentioned that format, that it started out Bible questions, Bible answers, more of a, you had several people on at once. And you said that part of the reason for that change was the controllability factor. It's hard to drive exactly where a discussion goes, that kind of thing. Was there any other component to why that format changed from more of the panel discussion to, expository, textual exposition?
The response that he got whenever he was by himself was very positive.
Okay.
People would respond with, wow, I really understand that passage now, where the other format tended to be everybody giving their opinion about a passage.
Right.
and people wanted to actually read it and say, okay, I see what you're saying, and then he would explain what that means, and I followed that path by, you know, not everybody knows all the religious terms and the Bible terms, and so you spend a little time on it and let people learn from what you know. So I think that was a big part of it, is the response people gave him when there was, and I'm sure you could tell when you're on with me, not near as much gets covered as when you're on yourself.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So you want to make the best use of your time. So single or two, but a panel of 4 is tough, and you're going to find that out today or later on, because the next 2 weeks, don't you have four of us?
We have 4 of us, yeah.
We'll see what those 4 work together, how well they work
We'll
together.
manage the chaos. So even though it's not always multiple people on at once, though, there were different people throughout the history of the ministry that helped with those hosting responsibilities, right?
Yes.
I mean, between you and I, we, of course, shared those responsibilities. Brian Poe has started that as well, Jim Larson. But tell us about some of the people that were involved over the years and how they got involved.
You know, I wouldn't want to leave anybody out, but I've got quite a list. And I know one of the earliest ones was Dan Skaggs from Hancock. And he came up here just like my dad to help build the church, because the church is really small up here. And he would come on the program, and there was a guy that just recently passed away, Keith Cartwright from Menominee, who was on the program with my dad. And they would do it together for a couple weeks, and then they would pretty much just have their own show for a month or so, and then it would shift back to my dad. And I kind of followed that. I didn't like doing 2 because I thought we accomplished more with 1. So I would invite you on, you would do a couple with me.
Right.
And then basically I wouldn't have to drive up here in the winter to record the show. I didn't want to go in the snow and the cold. So
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a big part of it. We're recording here, you know, pretty much in Agani, and so driving up from Escanaba on a regular basis is not super feasible, and that's pretty much the kind of the layout you had with Jim Larson, was that he would cover during the winter when that travel was more difficult,
Right.
and then you would do pretty much every other time of year.
I would cover about 9 months out of the year, and then Jim or whoever else was my co-host would take 3 months during the winter so that I wouldn't have to travel up here. There were days I didn't make it. I remember Tom Gray was, he was the main guy for me, the go-to guy. And I called him and says, I don't think I'm gonna make it. And he goes, well, we'll do it another time. We can tape Friday, or we can tape after they clear the roads. But the roads would be so bad. And coming up here, they got worse as I got here.
Yeah.
So it became a good fit to have a Marquette guy do the program during the winter. And Jim Larson was that same kind of host. He covered. You didn't do it a lot, but you did it initially, and then I sought a way out to be retired. And so you pretty much took over rather quickly. Somebody else did that too. Oh, the preacher before Jim Larson was Roger Rhodes. He was on, and we did it together for a long time, and then we shifted to single host somewhere in the middle of Rogers. But we had, after Keith Cartwright, we also had Mike James, we've had Dan, I mentioned Dan. There's a lot of preachers that were on, but we also had some non-preachers, which was interesting. You never got to meet Dixie, did you?
No.
Dixie Franklin, and a lot of you will know who she is. Dixie Franklin was a travel writer, and she was a member of the Marquette Church of Christ. And she was a dear friend of mine, so she went to the Holy Land on a trip to do her travel writing. And when she got back, she had all these beautiful pictures, and she had all these it was just a wonderful presentation. I said, well, can you come on TV and do it with me? And so we kind of formed a partnership, and she would explain something. She says, Dave, why don't you read this passage? And it was about the shepherds in the fields, and she had all kinds of beautiful pictures of the shepherds in the fields. What a beautiful program we had. We did it for 2 weeks. And then we went on the road, and we went to service organizations like the Lions Club and the Rotary, and all over the UP. She would establish these speaking engagements, and we'd put on our presentation, and all my job was, okay, we're in Matthew chapter 6. So Dixie was one of our hosts. My son-in-law was a host for a while when he finished his ministry training. And as soon as Brian got here, I tried to get him involved right away, because what a great way to reach out to the entire UP.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about the theme song for a second, because that's actually a really big part of our identity. Now, I know this is not something we've really publicly shared. There was a time that, for technical reasons, really, we were looking at potential for changing our theme song. And it wasn't until I was out somewhere and I had mentioned Let the Bible Speak, and somebody said, oh yeah, it's Lord, the light of your love. Like, their whole association of the program was musically through the introductory and closing song. So that actually plays a really big role in who we are and what people think of when they think about the program. And so right now, our theme song is Shine, Jesus, Shine. The performance itself is one recorded by the Hallel Singers, and but that has not always been the intro song.
No.
So tell us about a couple of the others that we've had over the years.
Well, I want to piggyback on what you say, where somebody knew the song when you mentioned Let the Bible Speak. I was teaching in school in Mark River as a sub, because my kids went to school there, and I wanted to be around where my kids were. And so I walked into class, one of my first classes, and the kids started singing Shine, Jesus, Shine, just because I walked in. And so I really liked that, and then we had a lot of good lessons, and I got to talk about my job as a TV host. We also had, I'll sing it to you. I'm building a bridge, God gave me the plan. It was a quartet called the Melody Boys, and he had that on for several years. And then Sweeter Gets the Journey Every Day. So for you older folks like me, you'll remember those songs.
Yeah, I don't think I don't know, not just have I not heard those particular performances of them, I don't know the songs. So those are classic gospel.
Oh, they're back from the olden days.
So we're here celebrating 50 years, and that's a long time. I mean, it's a long time for a marriage. It's a long time for just about anything these days. I mean,
sure.
You know, we're in a very fast-paced culture, a lot of change, but here we are 50 years after the inception of this ministry. To what do you attribute the longevity of the ministry itself? Why has it lasted this long?
I wrote down a couple things to answer this question, because I didn't want to forget this. And we've already talked about we don't ask for money. And so it makes us different right away. And then an uncle of my wife said to me one week when we were having dinner together or whatever, he says, I can't believe you just actually open the Bible and read it right there on TV. It's not a regular thing for people to do, is to sit down and actually look at the words and say, okay, I see that. And we've had people come to our church in Escanaba and say, this is the church for me, because you have Bibles and everybody opens their Bible and reads it. That's our authority. That's how we can be unified as a religious organization, is you have to have the same authority and read the same Bible. So we do. We read a lot. That's where the name came. Yeah. Let the Bible speak. And so it also came from, and we'll do that in another show, but with the panel, an idea that where the Bible speaks, we speak. And where the Bible's silent, we're silent. There's more to it than just that. So it's important. I think that's the longevity of the program. We really read our Bibles.
I remember when Dave was talking to me about the program itself. When I first came up here, I didn't know much about it, and we were talking about the finances behind it and stuff like that. And I'll never forget one of the things that you said to me. We were sitting there in Big Boy, and he said, as much as we might talk about this, technically and think about the money behind it or whatever, God will make it work as long as he wants it to work, right? Mm-hmm. The core reason, there might be these secondary reasons, but the core reason it's lasted this long is because God has sustained it this long, right?
Yes.
That's really what's at the heart of it. God has allowed it to happen. And the day that he doesn't want it to happen is the day that we're going to stop. So
I didn't write that one down, so can I use that?
Sure.
I didn't remember
the next
saying
time
that.
You remember Nebuchadnezzar got struck down for not giving credit for his kingdom to God.
Exactly. I should have put that in there.
Okay, I'm really curious what you'll say to this one.
Oh, boy.
What is something about Let the Bible Speak most people don't know?
Okay, this is my time to tell you. There was a young lady who became a Christian in 1972 and came to Escanaba and knocked on our door, and I answered the door, and her name was Linda, and she wanted to meet my parents because she wanted to be part of the church in Escanaba. And when my dad started thinking about TV, she wanted to help. So she would be hour after hour making address labels, because back then you had to use a mimeograph and everything. And she would send out these newsletters for my dad and help him with that. And over the years, she started handling the treasury. She's still doing the treasury today after 50 years. And of course, she's getting older now, and so she couldn't be here to celebrate with us, but Linda Haig has been a big part of the ministry for a long time, and most people don't know behind the scenes what's going on. And I just want to honor her in that way, because 50 years is a long time for anything, and she hasn't even been married 50 years. But yet she's been married to the TV ministry for 50 years.
So Linda, I know you're watching this because I believe you watch every episode. So Linda, we do appreciate you very much, and we're really grateful for all of the work that you put in. By the way, if you mail in the Bible correspondence course, if you do the back and forth with that, she's the one that sees that, and she's the one that writes the feedback and sends that back to you. So yeah, she's been a big part of this.
She was also a chauffeur for my dad. When he wasn't feeling up to driving up here, she would drive him to the TV ministry, to the studio to record. A great Christian lady.
So this is going to be kind of the transition from this episode to the next. But I want to get your thoughts on it first. The Bible, obviously, you see it in the name, has been at the core and at the center of our entire ministry. Mm-hmm. Why is that? Just in simple terms, why do you think that is?
Well, I've written things about it in history and a letter on the webpage, but it's the only hope for unity in the religious world is that we have the same authority. We don't make up our own rules. God has given us direction, and so how are we going to know that? By letting the Bible speak in our lives. So I think that, to me, is the mission. If you want to be part of the church, if you want to be pleasing to God, you want to get into the Word and follow what it says. It'll change the way you behave. It'll change the way you talk. It'll change who you hang out with. And that's a good thing, because you'll be pleasing to God.
Yeah. Yeah, there are a lot of places you can go to listen to a couple people talk about stuff. You can go to an infinite number of podcasts and YouTube channels and all that, and you can hear people's opinions and all sorts of things. The goal of this show is not to give you our opinions, really. It's Now, sometimes we might give you an interpretation that some people interpret it one way, some people interpret it another, but ultimately what we're trying to get down to the core of is we're trying to tell you what the Bible says, because at the end of the day, who cares what I think about a particular thing? Who cares what Dave thinks about a particular thing? The only authority inherent in what we say is the authority that lies within our ability to communicate what God is saying to you.
Amen.
Right? So, quick question here. What do you see in the future of the program moving forward? We're not just looking at the past. We're thinking about the program and its coming years. And what are you excited about?
Well, I'm excited about the fact that we found 2 young men that were willing to pick up the reins and keep this going. We've developed a situation where Alex is the primary host, and he's the one who calls and makes things happen. Brian is his co-host, and the elders in both churches, Escanaba and Marquette, are their direction and their sounding board, and they give them leadership and guide them. So if we can, I see the future being very bright, because we have young people, bright young people, who want to take that and lead into the next generation.
Absolutely. Before we go, we would love to tell you about some of our resources that we have available to all of our viewers and listeners out there. First of all, that Bible correspondence course we mentioned earlier, that is something that is available to all of you. You can participate in this either by mail, or you can do it online, going to worldbibleschool.org. You can get more information on that. If you don't have a Bible, we want you to have one. We will be happy to send this to you totally free of charge. You don't have to pay shipping or anything like that. Just let us know that you would like one. You can reach us by mail at P.O. Box 372, that is in Marquette, zip code 49855, and you can find a lot more of this information on letthebiblespeak.net. You can find all of the audio for these episodes by searching Let the Bible Speak UP on any of those podcast apps on the right side of your screen, and then you can find us on YouTube by the same name. We'd love to have you join us for worship if you're available at 11 a.m. either at Marquette or Escanaba Church of Christ. We look forward so much to talking more about the mission of the program next week. We'll catch you then. Have a wonderful, blessed week.